I've never met a woman who isn't like that. Like other than like my mother and like grandparents, I've never been like someone that's around my age. I've never met someone that would genuinely want to help me if I had like a problem with that. So I wish this could be reality, but it just really isn't. Like in
I
today's
think it can
society, it
be
really
reality.
isn't.
I think it might not be your reality because of, unfortunately, it sounds like you haven't dated the greatest people, to be honest. So what's the likelihood that you're on here to just troll and then you're gonna start screaming the N-word on my stream to try to get me banned?
No, so I'm not trolling. I wanted to ask you a few questions about why you think that cheating is always wrong and why you dislike Trump so much.
Okay, let's start with the cheating question. Why do I think cheating is always wrong? Because,
Yeah.
well, as the name implies, you are doing just that. You're being deceptive, you're being dishonest, and you are, I guess in this case, having sex with somebody else after you have committed to being exclusive with only one person. I think that if you want to go sleep around again, then you should probably break up with that person first. Even that's kind of douchey to be just like, hey, we're done. And then you go off and like just start like fucking the strip club. But if we're talking you're in a relationship, whether it's marriage or dating, and then you go off and sleep with somebody else, you're violating the agreement you made with that person. And you're also arguably abusing them emotionally because that's really something very humiliating and difficult to go through. And I see no reason as to how that could ever be okay.
Okay, so I want to ask you, wouldn't it be a good idea for like men to spread their seed and not just be limited to one woman?
Um, I mean, no, it
Because
depends. Like, what do you mean
because
spread their seed? Wouldn't you want the man there to also help raise the child?
of course, but wouldn't you want them to like be able to spread their seed with multiple women and not just be limited to one? Because many men they want to have a large offspring, so it may be hard for them to just limit themselves to one woman. So maybe it's easier for them to, you know.
Hold on just a second. I'm sorry. Give me 3 seconds. People are saying that you're trolling me, but you don't really sound like a troll. So you want to continue? Go ahead.
Why would I be? Why would I be trolling you? I'm
My
just
chat
curious.
tends to think that everybody's a troll at first, and then the problem is that there's been a couple people that are like, "No, I am not a troll. I swear I'm not a troll." And then like afterwards, they come out and say that they were a troll, and they like wasted my time the whole time. But I don't. Again, I'm gonna just take your
No,
word for it. One can only do just that. So please
no, I
continue.
promise I'm not trolling you.
Okay, so
All right,
why do you think that it's so you're saying you think it's better for men to just be out spreading their seed? Do you see any
well,
potential
not
issues
always.
with that? Like what spreading their seed implies that they're getting multiple women pregnant, right?
It's not always what's best for some men. Some men just want to settle down with just one woman, but a lot of men they want to have like large offspring. So it's hard to do that with just one woman.
What do you mean they want to have a lot of offspring? I thought guys joke about like paying child support and all that shit and how that sucks.
Well, you know how like some men they want to have a lot of children so they can like carry on their legacy, like a lot of sons, and just so they can carry down their DNA and stuff.
Well, yeah, I get that. And I also understand that you might be talking a little deeper, like a biological drive, but you can do that with one woman. Like if you want offspring
Well,
to keep your legacy going or whatever, like, yeah, have 3 or 4 kids with your wife. Because the thing you're
but
saying would lead to far more complications. Even if the guy had some biological drive to have sex with a bunch of different women and have no commitment or whatever, then you're talking about introducing more children into this world without a good father into a single mother home. Like that's a really bad environment for a kid to be raised in generally. So maybe yeah, the guy got to do have his little fun, but at what cost? It's pretty much at the cost of those women he's impregnated and the children that are born.
but in some occasions, the men can take care of multiple children and take care of their multiple wives. Like if they're very rich, I don't think that very poor men should be, raising like 50 kids. But if they have a lot of money, then I feel like that might be okay sometimes.
Yeah, but you have to understand that a kid growing up without a dad, it's not going to like replace the father if you just throw a lot of cash at that. Like there's more than just financial support. You're right that if the guy is really rich, he could provide financially. And I mean, yeah, you're right. That happens already. However, that does not replace the emotional connection that you would lose with your parent. So, if we want to talk about, I mean, I don't know how much in the red pill side of things you are, but your position
What's
definitely
red
sounds
pill?
It's like what the your position pretty much sounds very much like a red pill position, that men should kind of be sleeping around if they want to, and this, that, and the other thing. But look at the kind of crimes that are committed by people. Like, you realize that if you're raised without a father, you're far more likely to commit crime, to go to prison, to just have an overall negative outcome in life. So, yeah, maybe you'll have better money. That could definitely help some of that, but like, that's not just going to replace the lack of emotional connection.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from with that, but there are certain occasions where I think that actually having like multiple children, it maybe actually they can help raise each other in occasions, you know? Like the older siblings can help raise the younger ones and like stuff like that.
I don't think you understand how damaging that is. Like that I understand that maybe like in theory that sounds like it'd be kind of nice. Like, oh, you have siblings take care of you, but like a sibling needing to be treated as if they're the parent taking care of shit is
No, no, they're
actually
not the
really.
parent.
Hmm?
They're not really gonna be the parent. They're gonna be kind of, kind of like a babysitter or something. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and expecting a sibling to take care of their younger siblings for long periods of time and having that be sort of like the regular setup is incredibly damaging for that sibling.
But
That,
isn't it
that's
pretty normal?
It's different if you're like, "Hey, I'm running to the grocery store. Can you stay home with the kids, the siblings for a little bit?" Then, "Hey, you're the older one, so your job here for most of the day is to be taking care of them, whether that's feeding them, putting them for naps, this, that, and the other thing, parenting them kind of on a day-to-day basis." That kind of an expectation, I believe is pretty harmful. I can double check, I'll look it up, but yeah, I know that what I've read, it's not pretty.
Well, okay. And honestly, I don't think that even if the father like has multiple children, I don't think that they just have to abandon them. I feel like they can still like take care of their children. Maybe not as much as if they only had like two or three, but they could still definitely be there for them and like pay for their things and like buy them food and stuff.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think that there's nothing wrong with having an older sibling take care of the younger siblings at time. Having them do chores and stuff like that is obviously beneficial for them. I'm not saying that like the siblings should never have any responsibility over their siblings ever. Like, obviously, I just mean that having it generally be this like, well, they have the older siblings, so that's somebody who can step in, and well, like that shouldn't be something that's just assumed. It shouldn't be a given. Does that make sense?
Right, but sometimes it's like there's certain situations where that has to be done, and oftentimes they can fare fairly similar to if they were raised by two of their parents. I just don't see very much of a problem with doing that.
Wait, if you're talking about some of the siblings have to do that, I would agree with you. Like if parents die or something, they might have to assume responsibility. But what you're talking about is not necessarily some sibling needing to do this. You're talking about a sibling getting stuck doing this because the dad wanted to be a fuckboy.
Right, right. Can I be right back? I just need to talk to my mother about something real quickly.
That's fine. I'm gonna look up this thing while you're gone. I'll
Okay,
just I'll
thank you.
just deafen you and then just come back whenever.
Okay.
So this is saying that people who siblings matter a lot for our personal growth. People who have close sibling relationships have better mental health, which I'm not surprised. Well, I looked it up what you were talking about, and in fairness, I think the thing I was thinking about is a little bit different than just like, hey, the older sibling can take care of the sibling sometimes. But what this is called is parentification, which more commonly is where the sibling or the child is suddenly expected to sort of parent the actual parents for whatever reason. Maybe there's like emotional problems or something for the parents. But it can also apply to a sibling. In parentification, one or both parents are unable to cope with what it means to be a parent to their child. The parentified child takes over the caretaking responsibilities for a sibling, or even the parents themselves, becoming caretaker, mediator, and protector, which is sort of what it sounds like you were talking about, with the sibling like mainly being responsible for the younger.
A
Um,
little bit.
and that's more what I'm talking about, which is really harmful. It's actually considered a form of childhood trauma. People that have gone through that. So I don't think that it justifies risking the well-being of multiple children again, just so that the dad can kind of be a fuckboy. Like the
Right.
dad should be present with the child's upbringing. Every single piece of research. I mean, it's not a controversial thing to say that being raised with a single mother is not a good environment to be raised in. Like that's almost just a given. That's like a duh fact. So the
But
dad
but
not
I
being
think the
there is
difference
pretty damning.
What I think the difference is that these children are raised like without a father at all. Like maybe their father left them or died or something like that, and then they just have to be raised by their mother or older siblings, and they have no father figure at all. But what I'm talking about is like the siblings just help out a little more. When like the father's busy or like they're out doing something,
Yeah, but like,
they
is the
can just
dad gonna come home to that house at night and like have dinner with the family? Or no, he's gonna probably be somewhere else with his other kids.
well sometimes, but like they can like take turns, kind of like a stepdad, or not a stepdad, but like
A divorced
the
dad.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and but there's a reason why divorces negatively impact kids, right? Like when you don't have the dad around, present as a constant. If you do have this sort of uncertainty, is dad going to be here tonight? Maybe he's out somewhere else. Like even the feelings of replacement as you see your dad kind of neglect you for a little bit for the sake of another family he also has. I just you have to recognize that there is a fuck ton of negative outcomes that would come from this mentality that like because you're a guy, it's okay for you to pretty much just like fuck around and impregnate everybody you want. I mean, that would be terrible for the people involved, and even for the guy, it would be really bad.
I don't think that's the way it is on every occasion. I think that there are certain exceptions, but I do understand what you are saying. But I feel like if the father is like still present in their life, I feel like, I mean, why not?
Well, it would depend again. Like if you're talking about the father still being present in the kid's life, but they're split apart with from the mother because of a divorce or something, that's a different circumstance than kind of setting up a societal expectation slash normalizing this mentality that you're a man. Just if you are married to one person or dating one person, you can just kind of go sleep around and just have like multiple families. That's kind of insane. Right? Like
Um,
there's an exception to anything. I mean, fuck, you want to hear about an incredible exception is there was a person once who had depression in like the 1980s and he tried to go and kill himself. And in the process of attempting to kill himself, he shot himself and just so happened, actually it wasn't just depression, he also had really bad OCD, sorry. And it just so happened that the way in which he fired that gun happened to hit the right part of his brain so that after he attempted to kill himself, rather than killing himself, his depression and OCD was cured because he shot that part of his brain out. But that's an
that's
incredible
insane.
exception, right? But yet,
But
so this is obviously, I get it, like a exaggerated example, but like we wouldn't then say like, well, maybe it's okay then to try and shoot yourself in the head every now and again to try and cure OCD. Like
no, no,
there's an
that's not what I'm
exception.
saying.
Well, I know that's an exaggerated thing. I'm not saying you're saying that per se, but like this mentality that, well, because sometimes it works out okay, it's probably okay for it to be kind of the general rule is silly. It's far more likely to end badly than it would be likely to end well.
Well, can't the mother like or the father like hire like servants or something to take care of the children? Like that's always an
Well, people
option.
are also pointing out in chat that I'm saying like a father figure is really important. It's important to have two parents present. This is why I also say it's fine for kids to be raised by like gay parents. It's not necessarily that you need a father figure intrinsically, but you need generally two parents in a stable environment. So the reason I've been saying a lot about father figure though is because you're talking about a man going around fathering people. So in this case, yes, it's incredibly beneficial to have two parents and to have them be stable. That provides a stable environment for the child. If you have this sort of wishy washy, maybe dad's going to come home, maybe not, he also has like five other families to attend to, then that's going to just give you anxiety as a kid. You feel replaced, you feel like you're completely insignificant and unimportant to your dad. And just hiring servants to do it instead, you have to understand that that sounds fucking depressing, right?
Yeah, I guess I can understand that, but I want to ask you, so you think that every child deserves a father figure? What about like lesbian parents? What about those situations? Should they not be able to raise children?
Well, no, I thought I just clarified, but I can make it even clearer. I'm saying a father figure in this context because you're talking about a father. It is important to have a father figure. However, when I say things like people raised by single moms have poor outcomes without a father figure, I should be clear. It's not really that there's not a father figure per se, but rather that there's not another parent present married, preferably, providing a stable environment. So this would be the same way with, yes, lesbian parents, gay parents. It can be two women, two men. Doesn't really matter if there's two parents and it's a stable environment and it's preferably a good socioeconomic situation, then that is the best environment for a child to be raised in.
So, what exactly, because you mentioned them being married, what exactly is the advantage of someone being married? Because I feel like in today's yeah, my bad. In today's society, it is more it is more like it's not as good to be married because there are so many things when it comes to like the government and taxes and stuff like that where it's not very much of a good idea to even get married. I feel like it would just be better off to just like,
Like
have one
stick
partner.
together, yeah. Well, there's
Yeah.
multiple things. I mean, first of all, you bring up the government, at least here in the US, I mean, you get tax benefits from being legally married. So there's that. Um,
But what
it's
about
also,
divorce?
what about it?
If they get divorced, isn't there some kind of taxes where the mother gets like a lot of money from
Oh,
the father?
alimony? You mean alimony?
Yeah.
Well, hold on. There's a couple things here. First of all, you're right that some people can still just like stick together and commit to each other. But I mean, based on data from Pew Research, even, it shows that people who are married are happier and have more sex compared to people who are just living together. So there's something about that marriage, something about the legal as well as social commitment that you have declared for this other person that can just lead to overall benefits. Marriage is also especially beneficial actually for men. Men who are married are happier, healthier, and live longer. This is all empirically demonstrated. And then when you
And
talk about, go ahead. Sorry,
why is
I've
there
been
so
talking.
many Oh, it's okay. I was just gonna ask, then why are there so many divorces? Like the divorce rate is so high, so obviously a lot of couples are not happy. So wouldn't it be easier just to see someone for a little while and then once you realize that it's not really working, just break up? I just feels like a lot more convenient than getting married, going through all of that, and then just ending it all for
Well, yeah,
because it feels like
I'm not saying you get married on like the first date. That's the whole point of dating. I don't have anything wrong with people who are. That's what I did. I dated, then me and Carissa moved in together, then we got married. So like, yeah, I'm not saying it's got to happen overnight. I'm not saying you should never have a time where you're not married. I mean, yeah, make sure it's the person you really want to be with and you love them and you want to commit to them. Um, when you talk about like divorce, first of all, the alimony thing, where the man is required to pay the woman, this is only in certain contexts, primarily when, let's say, let me lay out an example for you. It'd be like if the man worked during the 50-year span of his marriage to this woman. So during the 50-year span of the marriage, he's been out working, okay? And during that same 50-year span, the mom has been a stay-at-home mom and she's been raising the kids. Well, the man is spending that time working an actual job and making money. The woman is providing significant benefits to the overall family. However, she's not financially compensated for that at all, ever. So alimony only works if, for example, you break up and the man has been like the top earner, but the woman doesn't really have any job options. She doesn't have job prospects. She doesn't really have any money even because she's been a stay-at-home mom for the last 50 years. She would need to receive temporary payments from the husband only until she's able to get back to financially supporting herself. And I know, at least in some states, if the court finds out that the woman is like not actively pursuing some kind of a career or a job option, then they can just revoke the alimony. So it's oftentimes get sold as if it's like women are going to just divorce the guy and then live the rest of their life on alimony. But it's like, no, it's a very short temporary thing where it's only designed to try and compensate a woman if she has not been working for a long period of time, which means she doesn't have any way of making money now that you guys are divorced. And keep in mind, by the way, too, that men have also been paid alimony from their wives before as well, if, say, she was the top earner.
okay. So I guess that makes sense. I never really understood that before, but I guess the explanation does make sense to me. But
Yeah.
I guess that overall, I just don't understand, like, if there are so high, like, divorce rates in the country, then obviously men and women aren't nearly as happy as we may think they are.
Right, but you also have to think about like why divorces occur, right? So, I mean, Obviously, the top reasons are I think it's like infidelity. Ironically enough, for the first part of this conversation, obviously any kind of abuse, emotional, physical abuse, and then I think like substance abuse if you become like a drug addict or something. But there's also more subtle ways or subtle things, I guess, that contribute to divorce. For example, women, as you know, oftentimes have to take up more emotional responsibility in a marriage. Men, the way that they're socialized right now, it fucking sucks because men are taught that they're supposed to mostly remain stoic, keep their emotions to themselves, don't express those emotions, suck it up, be a man. That's what a lot of guys are taught. But when you do that, you lose the ability to have emotional intelligence. You lose the ability to express real emotions that are happening because you think you have to just bottle it up because you're the man, you got to look tough. And when you are taught that, and that's the way you grow up, then that means that you lack emotional intelligence and the ability to connect with others emotionally. So when women get married, they want that emotional connection, but a lot of guys fucking suck at giving
Right.
that to them.
So oftentimes, I don't think that men like showing emotional, like showing that emotional connection because they don't want to be vulnerable with the woman because they assume that the woman is turned off by it. And I've seen multiple times in like relationships that I'm in, women really don't like super emotional men. Like I used to be kind of more of an emotional person, and most of the women I would hang out with were very turned off by me showing any emotion at all. They wanted me to be kind of like the more stable one and kind of help them through their problems.
Yeah, but you can do that and also be emotionally intelligent. Like the I'm not saying that guy I feel like it goes the exact same route every time I bring this point up. I'm not saying the guy should be like weeping about everything or
No, no,
sobbing
of course not.
uncontrollably, but there's a time and a place for you to be vulnerable. There is. There's a time and a place for
Right.
you to be willing to express emotions, whether that's crying, whether that's just venting, maybe it's like whining like a bitch, whatever it is. People have emotions. Men have the equal amount of emotions as women do. But
But
only
I feel
men
like men,
no, but only men are expected to hide those emotions.
no, no, I feel like the difference is men handle like their emotions differently. Like women might start crying when, say, their dog or something dies, and a man might maybe go to the gym or something like that. I don't know, but I feel like they handle their problems differently because you have to admit that women are often much more emotionally driven than men.
Emotionally driven, I wouldn't say emotionally driven, but women on average, yes, do tend to express more emotions. But if
I'm
we're
not
actually
emotionally driven.
No, but if we're actually talking about one like decision making, most evidence we have suggests that although women do have a greater emotional response to certain things, they that doesn't actually influence the decisions they ultimately end up making. So women were just as logical in some of these thought sequences that they were given for the sake of the study, for example. So women aren't really like emotionally driven, but women are on average more emotional in the sense that they express more emotions. But something that's really interesting that is totally overlooked a lot is that there's a difference between feelings and emotions. So feelings are more conscious. That's like somebody hurts your feelings because they were mean to you, something like that. That's a conscious thing. But emotions refer to an actual biological response. This is why if you're being emotional as far as depression or deep sadness, that's you actually have something that changes in your brain, like brain chemistry shifts and reacts to that. So it's not just about like sucking it up. These are guys experiencing real emotions, and rather than dealing with it in a healthy way, they're taught to just kind of suck it up because it might turn their partner off. Like if you have a partner, she doesn't have to be turned on 24/7. Like there's more to dating and marriage than just like your parent perpetually being horny for you. I think that would ultimately lead to more problems, right?
Right. So I just feel like, back to what I said before, I feel like men just express their emotions differently. Like throughout entire history, you don't see men ever get start like crying or anything like that. And I don't
That's
think that's
just a
just
lie.
because,
That's not true. I'm not accusing you of lying. I don't think that you're intentionally telling falsehoods, but that's actually just blatantly false. There was a time, even during medieval times, where it was literally called chivalrous weeping, where it was seen as a masculine thing, specifically that men would be not just like shedding a tear to weeping before going out jousting or whatever they would do. So that's not even true. There's plenty of times throughout history where things that we nowadays consider feminine were once deliberately considered masculine.
But I feel like things may change over time, and I feel like the way men express their emotions have just evolved over time from like crying to maybe actually trying to do something about like what you're so emotional about.
Yeah, but isn't it the first step of doing something about it, recognizing the problem, and if you're just suppressing it, that's not going to help. The better thing to do would be recognize the situation. If you are in a situation where it's appropriate to be more emotional and vulnerable, then you do so. Get it out. Let it don't just bottle it up. Once you confront the problem and the emotions, then you can start taking steps to fix whatever's causing that.
But what is the benefit of crying? Like, I feel like there's so many other things you could do rather than crying that would help you get over something.
Well, it depends. I'm not really saying that men should be crying. It's more that it's harmful to expect men not to cry. Does that make sense?
But why? Why is that harmful?
Because you're telling men to suppress their emotions.
Men can show their emotions without crying, can't they?
Yes, but usually how does that manifest itself? It's usually in anger and aggression, right?
Right.
And
But I feel like the
you
other
realize that anger is what's called a secondary emotion. So it's still a real emotion in the sense that there's a biological thing going on. However, anger being a secondary emotion means that it stems from a more fundamental emotion. So if you are, say, sad and lonely, you might act angry, but that anger is secondary. It's there ultimately because you are sad and lonely. So crying is not necessary, although it can bring benefits to the body and your general sense of well being, even. But it's not so much like men should be crying more. No, women should cry. They should cry the same amount. It's more just expecting men not to cry or treating it like they're being a wimp or they're being a little bitch or something. It's that's the harm. Does that make sense?
okay, yeah, I do understand what you're saying. So, like, crying helps men like just release the tension, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And again, I'm not saying like if a guy doesn't want to cry, if he's like not comfortable doing that, then don't cry. Yeah, you can express your emotions other ways that are also healthy. Um, but again, it's more like you're a guy, so you shouldn't cry. You're a guy, so you can't cry, or else you're being wimpy or feminine. It's more that attitude that's harmful rather than like a guy who doesn't want to cry not crying.
Right.
I can
Oh my,
go ahead.
what was that?
So I just looked up the benefits of crying just to see. Um, It detoxifies the body, it dulls pain, it improves the mood, it rallies support, helps you recover from grief, restores emotional balance. Oh wait, but it also says helps baby breathe. Hold on, am I ever looking at the wrong argument article? I mean, um, but yeah, like this is actually cool. Restores emotional balance. How many guys do you know that they would never cry? They would tell you that that's the wimpiest beta, shitty, girly thing you could do, but they're like raging out over everything. Like that's being more emotional and unhinged than just crying in an appropriate time and place.
But why can't men just, if they're feeling that kind of emotion, why can't they just cry when they're alone and not in front of a bunch of people? Because that's usually what I do if I feel like I need to just release the feelings that I have. I'm not gonna cry in front of my entire family. I feel like
No, I don't think you have to. And yeah, if you're more comfortable doing that alone, that's fine too. But like, it's also really good to ultimately have support, whether it's some form of emotional support. It could just be like another homie who kind of understands what you're going through or something. Um, so yeah, it's again, I'm not saying like you can't do it alone. It's more like ultimately you're going to benefit more so from just having a support group. This is why I'm fine with like this, or this is why I always find it weird when like the when you make the type of arguments like you shouldn't cry in front of your partner. It seems really weird. Like if it's your partner, especially if you're married, like that's the person you're supposed to be able to be the most vulnerable with at times.
I've never been able to be that vulnerable with a partner. So I don't know. Maybe it's different for some people, but I feel like they'd very much judge me and not want anything to do with me if I ever showed that kind of emotion.
Unfortunately, you're right that that's a lot of guys feel that way, but the problem with that again is because of ultimately the social stigma around that. So,
And then
go ahead.
there's really not much you can do about that though. Like, just because just because you feel like you should be able to cry doesn't change the reality that women are most likely going to judge you for showing emotion.
Yeah, but I don't care. That's the thing is like people judge me for everything. People are gonna judge you for everything. That like you walk to the Walmart, maybe you're wearing like a pair of pants they don't like, and someone's gonna judge you for that. I don't think that
But what
I don't hold on, wait. I don't think it's worth risking your mental well-being for the sake of a woman. That
but what
sounds
if
like
it's
a
a woman?
simp thing.
No, but what if it's a woman you really love? Wouldn't it be harder for her to leave you over showing too much emotion than crying in front of her all the time?
If it's a woman you really love, then you should be able to cry in front of her sometimes, and she should understand that and be there for you. I'm not saying that you should be sobbing all the time, but if you're going through some shit and you need to let it out via crying, then a partner who can be the sort of support for you, and then at times you can be the support for them, that is going to be the best, most healthy relationship ultimately.
Right. I wish this could be the reality, but it just really isn't. Like, I've been through so many relationships, and every single one, every time I start being vulnerable and opening up, they get turned off and decide to leave. So
It sounds like
I
you
wish.
might be talking to the wrong people. Like, I think that if a woman is going to leave a guy who cries, then she's a piece of shit. And you know what? I think you just dodged a bullet because I don't think you want to be with anybody long term if you have to legitimately suppress emotions around your partner of all people.
Right, but I've never met a woman who isn't like that. Like, other than like my mother and like grandparents, I've never been like someone that's around my age. I've never met someone that would genuinely want to help me if I had like a problem with that. So I wish this could be reality, but it just really isn't. Like in
I
today's
think it can
society, it
be
really
reality.
isn't.
I think it might not be your reality because of, unfortunately, it sounds like you haven't dated the greatest people, to be honest. But I mean, it absolutely is a reality in the sense that there are women like that out there. Yeah, for sure.
But they use
Mm.
I've just never seen it. Like,
I mean, I
I,
get emotional somewhat frequently, okay? And my wife is right there with me all the time. And then if she gets emotional, I'm right there with her. It's more of
and
just an equal partnership.
it doesn't turn her off and make her want to avoid you at all.
No, she actually just commented as a joke and said that my tears are proportionate to the amount of lube. No, it doesn't. It doesn't turn her off. I don't think it would turn her on. But you know that there's also plenty of evidence that when women cry, it specifically turns men off. Also, like the when you are crying, your body releases pheromones or something that actually turns men off and makes them more uncomfortable around you. That's not even the case for women.
But when it comes to people like me, like if I'm with a woman that is crying, I'll ask them like how I can comfort them and make them feel better and like try to assess the problem. But if I were to do that, then a woman would be like, "Stop being a bitch and just grow up." Like,
Damn, you need to get you gotta, man, you gotta dump that girl, okay? Go and find someone better because they are out there.
I did a long time ago, but
Mm.
I wish this could be reality, but I feel like it really isn't.
Well, do you understand that it might not be reality for you yet, but it is still reality in the sense that like this is something that obviously exists. Even if it's not, even if it's less common, it still exists. Like it is still a part of reality.
Right, but it's just very hard to find, and I feel like men have to like train themselves for like the most common response. So I feel like that's why they feel like they need to suppress their emotions and things like that.
Mm. Yeah, I think that that's really ultimately what I would call toxic masculinity, which is the expectation of how men should behave that ultimately is toxic to the man. And it's just it does a lot of damage. It's really sad. There are guys in America, especially. Or, I mean, men are the highest, the group that commits the highest rate of suicide. We have men that have way less friends. We have men that are lacking emotional regulation and emotional intelligence, which literally contributes to divorce. We even have studies demonstrating that when men have these expectations of how they as a man should behave, if they fail to live up to those expectations, they're actually more likely to. I'm not saying they will, but they're more likely to engage in physical violence against a partner because they ultimately are feeling insecure for failing to live up to ultimately arbitrary standards that we as a society have collectively said, well, if you cry, we're going to say that's girly. Like, there's no real reason to live up to those standards other than because society says so. And that's what hurts men.
Right, and I feel like men, they're not really allowed to feel like depressed or something because I used to talk with my friends and stuff like about how I was feeling and I'd even post it like on Snapchat or Instagram or something like, yo, I'm feeling depressed and I'd like to have someone to talk to and nobody cared. Like nobody really cares about men's emotions. So I feel like that's a very big problem in today's society.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry that you went through that too, because that probably felt pretty sucky. It probably felt pretty shitty to be like, hey, does anybody want to talk? And it seemed like nobody cared. But I mean,
But
there are friends out there though that you can find that will care about that.
well, I've never been able to find any, so hopefully that'll change in the future, but I just don't know.
Hmm. I mean, I hope you can as well. And again, I'm really sorry to hear you went through that, but unfortunately, you're
It's fine.
also correct in the sense that yeah, that's the outcome of some of these harmful expectations that we keep perpetuating. And so for me, it's like, or for when you have this conversation with me, it sounds like you're talking about perpetuating something that you yourself have acknowledged now has hurt you and hurts men, but you're arguing that we should just keep going and perpetuating it because women might not like it differently. Like at some point, we have to be like, we don't care. I care more about men not killing themselves than I do about them finding a girlfriend. And again, if you have a girlfriend or a partner that's going to leave you if you cry, then I think that that person is a piece of shit and you dodged a bullet. But I
Right.
feel bad that it sounds like you went through some tough shit for sure.
No, it's completely fine. It's just it's hard because I want a relationship with someone because I just want someone that'll actually care or something, but it just never happens. I always turn up being the same. Like I try to say, "Oh, you want to talk a little bit? I'm having kind of a rough night," and they're like, "Oh, I'm busy right now. Maybe later." And then eventually they start growing more and more distant until it eventually ends. So I wish that reality could be that men could, you know, be themselves more and not have to completely fake everything. Because even past like showing emotions, they have to pretend like they're this big. They have to be very rich. They have to be very strong. They have to be very they have to be very funny. They have to be all of these things to even have a chance at getting a woman nowadays. And it's very difficult because they can't really be themselves anymore. They have to just change everything about themselves to just draw the attraction of women. And I really
Right.
wish it didn't have to be like that, but it's just the way it is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't think that's. I think that we might be a little different. Is there's a lot of ways that things are right now. Then, but some of the ways things are is bad, and we need to be willing to say that it's bad and push against it. For me, it's. I mean, I've never really been. Thankfully, I never really was raised in an environment where it was like, if you cry, you're like a bitch or anything. Like I was honestly, I was kind of a crier as a kid. I would say for sure. And thankfully, I was just in an environment where that never really like I was never made fun of for that or anything. But um, it's definitely harmful long term, especially for guys who are raised in that kind of an environment. Because I mean, even what you're talking about, like just wanting some friends, I assume that you're talking about just like other bros, right? To like hang out with. But
Could
even
be anyone.
yeah, but even that is harmed when you realize that the way in which you make a good friend, a friend in which you really you're not just like you're not just acquaintances. You actually like connect deeper. You know what I mean? In order to build a friendship like that, you also have to be emotionally vulnerable. But if guys are consistently told that being vulnerable at any time is bad, again, I'm not saying you should be crying all the time, but like they're taught that like if you ever show a sign of being vulnerable, that means you're being weak, you're showing signs of weakness, girls won't like it, you're being a bitch. How are you going to make friends with anybody if you're unwilling to ever be a little bit vulnerable at times? You're just going to have conversations about like the weather, did you see the sports game? Like nothing's going to get very deep and personal, you know?
Well, I've had an online friend for a few years, and I've never had to like confide about my emotions with them. I don't feel like I could ever do that because I feel like they'd abandon me and call me weak. So I feel like we talk about other things like our common interests in like music and movies and things like that, but we can never talk about like our feelings or anything like that because I just feel like that'd be very awkward.
Yeah, and I mean it again, it's like there's some people that it might not be like, I'm not saying you should be going on a first date and then like trauma dumping. I don't know if you ever heard that term, but like where you just start being like,
No.
oh, everything is negative. When I was a kid, this bad thing happened, and now I'm so sad. Like, obviously, I'm not saying you got to go off and be like trauma dumping on other people, but if the time and the place allows for it, if you're somewhere where it seems appropriate to express emotion or whatever, the mentality that because you're a man, you need to just swallow it is just really harmful because that doesn't just go away. It compounds and compounds. And before you know it, it's leading to an overall negative just sense of self. You could be feeling more depressed. You might not even know why, but it could ultimately be because you've been just bottling up emotions constantly and you don't have healthy coping mechanisms. So I don't know. I understand where you're coming from, and I'm really sorry to hear that you're sort of dealing firsthand with some of these negative expectations. But I also would encourage you to not be afraid to challenge them in certain areas. I'm not if there's somebody you're not comfortable being vulnerable with, I'm not saying you should force yourself to be. But if the time and the place allows for it, it's okay to like be yourself, even if that means being a little vulnerable or having a little bit of emotion here and there, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to a healthier, happier life and friendship slash relationship.
Right.
But I mean,
Yeah,
if
man.
you're ever wanting some more friends to chat to, I mean, hey, I would love to have you hang out here in the Discord. There's lots of people here in the little Discord community that would, I'm sure, be really happy to chat with you and see how you're doing. And I know that there's most people in my Discord agree with me, so I doubt you're gonna run into a lot of people that are like, "Don't be a little bitch. Oh my god, you're crying." Like that's stupid. Everybody has emotions, and it's there's nothing wrong with expressing them.
Well, man, I appreciate that. It definitely means a lot because I've never really had that in my life before. So I definitely consider that. And yeah, what you said was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And again, I'm sorry to hear that you kind of went through that, but let me make sure I know your name, Jamie Cusick. I'll keep an
Right.
eye out for you on Discord. Also, if I see you in there or anything, I'll make sure to say hi or whatever. But yeah, over on my main Discord, you'll see it over in the info section of this server. It says join the other server. Um, there's like
I
voice
tried to,
calls you can get on with people and all that stuff.
yeah, I tried to join that one and there wasn't any like chatting thing. So I was a little confused about that.
Yeah, when you sign up, well, it sounds like you're already verified with Discord. So when you get there, you have to go through and like click an emoji to agree to the rules, and then it'll open everything up for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will try that.
Well, I'm glad that we could have this conversation, and have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
So, yeah. Debates keep getting wholesome, man.